So anyway, I'm Crystal Kennedy, and we've got other, obviously, assembly members here, and you just want to do the roll call yourself. That makes sense too. All right, we can do that.
Okay, Mr. Wilson?
Here.
Ms. Kennedy?
Here.
Mr. Peterson? Mr. Constant?
Here.
Mr. Dunbar?
Here.
Ms. Solotel? Here. Chair, you have a quorum.
Thank you. And just for the record, the date is February 20th, 9 a.m. And around the room, we certainly have others with us, so if people could introduce themselves, that would be great. So if you want, we have our interpreter.
Luann and Dave, the sign language interpreters.
Chris Schutte, Director of Economic and Community Development.
Dave Whitfield, current planning manager.
Bob Dole, Development Services Director.
Geraldine?
Travis Owen, my wife, Denise.
Ryan Yelp, Planning Department.
Hannah Belser, Clerk's Office.
All right. Thank you.
Eugene Carl Haberman, Observer.
Great, thank you. Okay, so first order of business is the marijuana application for Mile High, Alaska. So, Owens, if you'd like to join us up here, you are more than welcome.
Where would you like?
Right there where it says reserve, that's a special place just for you. So. All right, so turn that over to staff then too, and let you fill us in on where we're at with the license application, please.
Okay, Mile High Alaska has applied for a municipal marijuana retail license. Upon review of the application for the license, the operating plan submitted indicates compliance with all the general license restrictions. No taxes, fees, or fines were found due. All safety and security standards were addressed in the operating plan. The plan review was approved by the health department. Permits will need to be obtained still. All of the retail license specific restrictions were also addressed in the operating plan, and there are no additional conditions recommended to be placed on the license.
All right, thank you. And there might be more questions, but I guess we'll go ahead and let Ryan, you can do part on the land use permitting, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. It's a request for a special land use permit for a marijuana retail sales establishment within I-1 district. The site is located within West Anchorage, southeast of the intersection, West International Airport Road and Cope Street. The proposed facility is of similar character and scale to surrounding structures located within this light industrial corridor. Approximately 1,375 square feet of available building space will be dedicated to marijuana retail, and the facility plans to be open between 10 a.m. until midnight, 7 days a week. There were differences between the floor plan and site plan that were submitted with the special land use permit and that was submitted with the land use permit. So that's why condition number 7 of this an AR under the special land use permit is in there. However, Mr. Owens has resolved that condition after staff report was finalized. So if the assembly would like to amend the assembly AR to remove that condition, we wouldn't have any objection to that. This use is consistent with the Anchorage 2040 land use plan and the West Anchorage district plan, and the provided site plans do not show any major alterations to the building facade or structure that would make it of dissimilar character, scale, or size when compared to surrounding structures. And the planning department recommends approval of the special land use permit, subject to the conditions as stated in the staff report.
Okay. Thank you, Ryan. And for the record, we've been joined by Assembly Attorney Dean Gates. And questions? Sure. Mr. Webb.
So are you the relief store?
No, sir, I'm not. I am Mile High, Alaska.
So are they moving out? Or isn't that same location?
It's at the same location. The building was separated in half and to include a partitioned wall down through the garage. And so they are a separate entity like Suite A, Suite D.
So the building has, if you look at it, has like the printer here, relief, and you're taking half of relief then?
So to speak. Relief was half of that building. The printing store, Business Supply, was the other half. And Relief had previously put a petitioned wall and made a Suite A, Suite D.
On that west half of the building?
Yes, sir. Yes,
So
sir.
they'll still be there?
Relief will be there for now.
What is relief?
Well, it's interesting because it's a really totally in-your-face CBD. I mean, they don't sell pot, but there's marijuana leaves, and it implies marijuana. So when you look at it, I mean, I think it's legal, but if it were marijuana, the signs totally violate the, marijuana and health benefits and all that stuff. And you have a shop right next to it that will abide by the rules. So I don't know that you stop that in any way, but it's kind of interesting. That
Unfair competition.
I don't know if we could stop it.
No, it's legal.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's legal.
It's out
legally
of the
operating
spirit of
business.
what we were looking for.
Mr. Chair, I don't know what our interest would be in stopping it.
No, I don't, just, for whatever reasons we have toned down signs and so on for marijuana shops, Relief went the other way.
I believe Relief's initial plan was to start a THC retail business. And due to some legal issues that they ran into earlier in this industry with AMCO, that they would never ever be able to get a permit.
Sure.
Because this opens up another thing. So you have.
Sir, could you speak
Oh, I'm
up?
sorry, yeah.
I wear hearing aids.
I have trouble hearing him too.
Well,
Sorry,
I'm
me,
sorry,
not
it's just,
you.
I got them turned up as far as they could go.
So we've had cases, you're in a strip mall and you have a wall now separating you from Relief. Is that wall, does it go all the way up to the ceiling, the roof?
In the retail area, it goes all the way up to the drop ceiling. In the garage, the way the sublease was written, it was stated as shared garage. When I came into this equation and made Mile High, Alaska, that was not gonna work for the garage. You don't share garages with other businesses for obvious reasons. Not to mention, we will have product coming into that garage, which would be another problem as well. So I had, part of my paperwork towards AMCO, with AMCO, was to put a petition wall. That wall is an 8-foot petition wall, goes all the way down and cuts the garage in half, but we still share the restroom. Both businesses share the restroom. And then I also have a petition wall around a 3-basin sink, mop sink, and a hand washing area.
So they can climb over that wall, over the tiles in here,
There's not gonna be any product in that garage area, and technically, I guess, they could crawl over. But with that same note, locks are for honest people as well.
But in your retail area, they could also climb
No,
over.
sir.
You're gonna go all the way up to, if you
Yeah.
only go to the ceiling tiles, they can crawl over.
I guess if they wanted to crawl over from the Relief side and fall through the ceiling, I guess that's possible. But again, the THC will not be housed in the retail area during off operations. In other words, when we're not open, it's not where it's gonna be stored. It's stored in a separate office in a safe.
You'll clear everything out of all your display cases and put it in a safe.
Absolutely.
Close.
That's according to AMCO's regulation.
I'm looking at Ryan, is that done? Every shop packs up their marijuana?
I don't believe so. I think they usually just keep them in display cases and secure the building. It's another layer of security for sure.
Is, because I'd have a hard time voting yes on this if that wall doesn't go all the way up to whatever you call the
Demising wall.
That's the demise of the roof, essentially, because people can crawl over. And I know from my experience, I had a store and someone did that, broke in, and you have
Where
an
would they
alarm
be
system.
crawling in from?
From
The Relief side?
Yeah, he has an employee or someone. I just know it's not hypothetical because it happened to me. It's super
Well,
easy to do.
with that same, if they could also just break through the glass windows as well.
Yeah, they certainly could.
I mean, there's no bulletproof remedy for security. I mean, that's why security is ever evolving. It's people get smarter and learn how to defeat the system. I've spent the last 14 and a half years protecting U.S. diplomats overseas, and our primary job is to evolve and make up new security measures in order to protect U.S. diplomats. So honest people are gonna be honest. Dishonest people, that's their job in life, is to be dishonest.
Right. Someone's got to claw over and grab your marijuana because it's very tempting.
Our policy is our product, after close of business each day, goes into the locked office, which then goes into a Liberty safe. That's where our product, we're not leaving product in the retail area. Now, that office does not have a drop ceiling. It is an enclosed room.
Anything else? So, any other questions? Chris, any questions?
No thanks.
I have a question, though, in terms of, you mentioned a shared bathroom. Is that something that's outside of your secured area, outside of your ID checking location?
Yes, ma'am. That's the secured bathroom is in the back, in the garage area.
Okay, then can somebody access your store through
The bathroom?
that bathroom
No,
area
ma'am.
from the other store?
No, ma'am.
Okay, you just mentioned it was a shared bathroom, so I just assumed there was dual access of some sort.
Yeah, well, it's shared between Relief and myself. I have the floor plans if you would like to see them.
So can somebody walk from Relief to their bathroom and then into your store?
No, ma'am.
Okay, thank you.
I do actually now have a question, Madam Chair.
Okay, go ahead, Chris. Mr.
So,
Johnson.
back to Mr. Weddleton's question about the wall. Is it something you would be willing to do, to construct the wall all the way up?
I'm not sure that is feasible, to be honest with you, due to the electrical plan, the electrical plans. I'm not an electrician, but due to the electrical and how it would be engineered.
It seems like a good engineer could make it work. I mean, building a demising wall, this isn't that impossible. You frame screening up there, basically. It didn't even have to be a full wall. It could be just screening. I mean, if that is the bar between getting Mr. Weddleton's support and not, I think that if you have the chair of the Economic Development Committee, who's been generally very supportive of industry, not supporting you, you might find yourself in a position where you don't like the result. And so I would really like it to hear you contemplate how that wall might be secured.
Okay, well, okay. We have two more questions then, but I want to give Mr. Owen a chance to kind of answer that too, but.
And I would just say I'm one vote of 11, so.
You're one vote of 11, but John, give me a break. You are a pretty persuasive vote in this conversation, and if there is a concern about safety and security, it's wise to address it now than wait for the news story about how the store was robbed and we didn't do our due diligence.
All right, thank you. Ms. Zolotel, you had a question?
Yes, thank you. Is it anywhere in here that it's your policy to lock your product up upon closing and in a safe, and where the safe is? I'm not seeing it specifically spelled out in the application anywhere.
Well, I believe it's stated as it will be secured in a locked room.
Do you know where that is?
Ma'am, I would have to refresh.
I didn't
Those documents
see it.
were written up several months ago, so I've encountered quite a few other obstacles in this path.
Oh, I wasn't done.
You wanna-
Yeah,
you
well,
wanna
I was
follow
gonna
up,
say,
Mr.
so in the past, we've required folks to put the demising wall in, particularly in strip malls, and I don't know if this is a reasonable alternative, if we can put some teeth in it. So that was kind of where I was going, but I would wanna see it somewhere in the documents or somewhere in the conditions of some sort, so.
Okay, Mr. Dunbar?
Yeah, three things. One, I thought we had changed our ordinance, or perhaps it was just changed the policy to try to discourage them from giving us very detailed floor plans of like, where's your safe? Because it all becomes public record. And so the state did that. I know the state did that so that people, for fairly obvious reasons. Chris keeps waving his hand.
I know, I was gonna
So
follow
I
I just
him
wanted,
too, so.
everyone keeps talking about it. The last time we dealt with this was the Great Alaska Fish Company, which was a tenant in a strip mall And not just because of security concerns, but also because of odor concerns. They were required to build a wall that extended all the way to the ceiling. And I don't know if that's been your policy in other similarly situated strip mall tenants, but that has been a recurring issue. Less about the security, although John has had personal experience with the lack of a wall that goes all the way to the ceiling and theft. It's been primarily because of odor concerns. And so for the neighbors' relief, and it sounds like a print shop, that could be a concern down the road. And so this body has in the past said you must construct not just a simple demising wall, but a wall that extends all the way to the top, to the ceiling.
Now, if I may, when you refer to the ceiling, this wall goes up to the ceiling.
I think you're
As Michael
talking the
Jordan would
roof.
say, the
Now,
ceiling
you're
is the
referring
roof.
to the roof.
That's
Yeah.
the first time the Michael Jordan quote works. The ceiling is the roof.
Wait a minute, I have Mr. Weddleton, and now I have Mr. Dunbar. Okay.
Finish mine. So I'll say, we also did another one in East Anchorage off Boniface where John made that same critique, and I pushed back against him then, and I'll do it again now. I do not think that it is always practical for us to impose something that is not in our regulations, but this is just because you had this experience, now you're imposing it on other folks, but we don't know exactly what their circumstances are. In the case with was it
Great Alaska Kush.
Yeah, Great Alaska
It's a
Kush.
different one.
They had, it's a different one. But in the Great Alaska Kush example, I was more supportive because there was a neighbor that was extremely up in arms. It was like, we need this for odor, but we don't have any evidence of that in the Boniface case, or in this case where that CBD shop probably smells more like cannabis than this retail shop is going to. Well, maybe not. I don't know. Whatever. But they don't have to abide by the same kind of regulations. So. I am opposed to us constantly imposing this requirement that's nowhere in our law. We've just sort of decided that it's something we should do, not knowing, like, you don't own this building, do you?
No, sir, I do not.
Yeah, so not knowing if the landlord will allow them to do it, or how expensive it's going to be. Like, I don't know, how much does it cost to raise a ceiling, a wall like that? I don't know. If it's tens of thousands of dollars, I just don't feel comfortable doing that when they are handling their own security.
And if I may add, what was your name, sir? I'm sorry.
Forrest, Mr. Dunbar.
Oh, Mr. Dunbar stated, Relief carries hemp in their store. They carry pre-rolled hemp. So I don't claim to be a subject matter expert in the cannabis industry. I don't even have the recreational experience for obvious reasons. Working for State Department, I carry a CDLA license, a captain's license. You know, these are all things that prohibit that type of activity. But most people that I've talked to since I've taken on this endeavor has all said the same thing. It's very difficult to tell the difference between hemp or THC, marijuana, by smell alone. And so I don't think that would be an issue with them, with Relief, saying that, well, we can smell, because they have a derivative of the same product, hemp, in their business.
Thank you. So I've got Meg first. So Ms. Zolotel and then Mr. Wells.
So yeah, I'm comfortable if it's otherwise secured. But there, on the odor issue, in the East Anchorage one, Mr. Dunbar reminded me, we changed the odor requirement to be at the door, didn't we?
We discussed it, I don't think.
Did we not ultimately change it? Because this has been one of those things. The lot line is different when we're in a multi-tenant situation. I remember the one with the Great Alaska Kush, but I thought we also made a change. Ms. Welzine probably remembers because that was her client.
Man, I should remember.
Okay.
I know that what we ended up doing is Boyd, the owner of Uncle Herb's, just took possession of that suite and rented it out, so we didn't have to do the wall. But I don't recall whether we adopted like a 20-foot from the doors thing. I think that was what we discussed.
Yeah, we were talking about something. I'm just trying to, for consistency's sake, try to remember that. So that would be really, at this point, the main amendment I would want to make if we've done it previously to put everyone on like equal footing for that.
We could get that information
yeah.
before the meeting.
Before
so
Tuesday,
if
so.
we wanted to put that as a potential amendment.
Yeah, but.
How would you be able to distinguish if the smell was coming from the marijuana shop or the hemp shop?
I guess I've never been to a hemp shop, so I don't know if they have an odor associated.
I mean, the relief shop is going to have an odor. They have flour that looks like, this is Jan Welting, sorry.
Thank you.
They have flour out that's very confusing. I mean, I feel like that's going to be difficult for you guys, but I think, you guys can operate great. But they have flour that looks like marijuana, and there's really no way to tell the difference unless you take it to a testing lab. So that whole relief model is not something that I think is good for the industry, but when the hemp rolls come out, maybe it'll restrict some of those activities. But yeah, it'll smell, and hopefully you guys don't get dinged as being a culprit.
Madam Chair.
Okay. Yes, Mr. Constant.
I just would add that still to this day, I have never heard of an odor complaint coming from a retail establishment, and they continue to be issues challenging cultivation, but at this point, we're contemplating retail.
Good point. Thank you. Mr. Wimbledon, I think you had something.
Well, I think agreeing with Chris, the smell has not been an issue with me because the retail shops don't have a big odor issue. But to me, it's security. And what we did with and I know odor came in. That wasn't from me though when we did the Great Alaska Kush Company, but the one. Janet, what's Lloyd's Josny's business?
Uncle Herbs.
Uncle Herbs. His one in part of Anchorage. I had the same concern with the wall, but we had in there, he's got to either have the wall all the way up to the roof or have control of the unit next to him. And that was the amendment we had in there. So he had control of that, so we let that go. But it is security. And do we have, it is our job. I mean, when we review these things, the security is critical, is in the public interest. And it's not in the public interest to have the marijuana accessible to people. I mean, we have all these rules, and you have to have your badges, et cetera, and so on. And you have to have your cameras and all this. I mean, we have a huge amount of security things. And if you leave the door open, well, it hardly matters. And, my experience, of course, is clear. But I mean, if you go look, it's really easy to climb. You climb up the shelving that already exists against the wall, and you lift that thing up. It takes no effort, and you go over the other side. And in my case, they did climb down my shelving, but you can jump. It's only 8 or 9 feet. So you're very, very vulnerable. And you have an alarm system, and it goes off. Mine did, but they have, when
We have an
you
alarm
need help
system.
right away.
We have a camera system. What I find interesting about the essence of a wall that goes all the way to the ceiling, and you refer to, so to speak, bad guys coming in from the relief side. All they have to do is break a window or break a door in the Arctic entry and enter that direction. If they were so inclined, they push through the garage door with vehicle and enter from the back of the garage. Is there ever enough security?
No, probably not. But those are extreme examples. A car through the window.
But they have to overcome the same obstacle to get into the building, regardless if they're coming in from the relief side, which is that would be harder for anybody to come in from the relief side, climbing over the drop ceiling into my side. They might as well break the front door of the Arctic entry, which we share, and go in through that. So if
I might ask the
They can
question
certainly
then.
do that as well.
yes, sir.
Yeah, I recommend you have bulletproof layering on your window. That's what I do at my stores, and it's a big help.
Okay.
But you are at risk, and to deny it with that roof, you're kidding yourself. Or to the wall. You do the wall, not go to the roof.
Mr. Constant, can you hold on just 1 second? I've got Mr. Dunbar in front of you, and then we'll get to your question.
Just because we have Jana and the applicant here, I'm just curious because it sparked my interest. What's a hemp pre-roll? Why would somebody smoke hemp? Or am I misunderstanding what they're doing?
Yeah, no, that's what they're doing. Janet, Welting for the record, they're selling, and I haven't seen it, but I've had clients send me pictures of it, like, oh, what the heck, how come this is allowed? Just like nugs of flour, and then they're actually selling what look like marijuana cigarettes, but they're hemp cigarettes, and I don't really know why anybody would smoke hemp because it's like very harsh. Maybe they like this. Maybe CBD comes better that way for them, for particular people. But it's a little bit concerning because I mean, easily you could have product in there that's over 0.03, and nobody would really know unless.
0.03 is it's got THC in it.
Correct. Yeah.
But the whole point of hemp was it didn't have THC.
Hemp can have up to 0.03 and be considered hemp. So there's no physical genetic difference between hemp and cannabis, but for the THC level. So that's
Gotcha.
why hemp can sometimes raise above 0.03 and be considered marijuana and have to be destroyed. In other states that have an active hemp program. We don't have an active hemp program yet, but we will. So it's really, because this stuff is totally unregulated, that's in that store. Soon it will be regulated if they comply with the hemp program.
Good to know. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Mr. Constant?
Yeah, I just am trying to imagine how the security system and cameras work. Are they pointing up to the ceiling? Do you get motion activated internal notifications and all of that? Because it actually is much savvier not to break in through the front so people would see it, but instead break in through the side where no one would really be paying attention.
Thank you, Mr. Owen. Did you want to?
Yes, ma'am.
Address that?
I have, CIS handles my security system. They also handle, which is the alarm. We have motion sensors both in the garage area and in the retail area. There's a primary sensor for both the entrance coming into the retail area and coming into the office area. As far as cameras run 24/7 with.
What do you have then the motion security in the offices as well? You said leading into, but you didn't say in.
I believe there is a motion sensor that's in the office as well, sir.
Right, because that's where you suggest you're going to store everything every day.
That's correct. There is a door sensor as well. Camera systems I have 4 cameras that are in the retail area. I have 1 in the Arctic entry. I have 1 that will be installed actually today or tomorrow that is covering the 180 degrees of the face of the front of the building. As far as the garage, I currently have a camera on the west side of the next to the office door. I have 1 on the east side. There will also be a camera that will be next to the garage door, which is a large garage door. Then I also have 2 cameras on the rear of the building, 1 covering the pedestrian door and 1 covering the garage door itself. The garage door also has an open sensor.
You didn't mention the cameras in your office. Cameras will be inside your office?
Yes, sir. There's 2 cameras, 1 on the west side and 1 on the east side of that office.
Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Weddleton.
Just following up on that, I have a lot of experience with cameras and alarm systems and so on. So when someone breaks in, and I've been broken into, the cameras are very helpful to show you that some person in a hoodie broke into your store. You can see exactly where they wandered. You don't know who they are or anything about them really, because it's just, they're sensible typically. And the alarms go off and the cops will get there 15, 20 minutes. And if the person who broke in came in over the top, the cops can walk the perimeter and look that it's secure and move on. And that's the way it works. If they smash in the front or break in a window, which has happened to me, well, then the cops know something's up and they deal with it. But, whoever breaks in, a typical thing, alarms can go off right away, but they got 15, 20 minutes to go and steal stuff. And that's the way it works. Your cameras don't provide security.
Okay, any other questions? Do we have any requests for information then before we actually see this at the assembly meeting? I'm kind of looking at you, Ms. Sawtelle, about whether or not we want information from any of the other ordinances that we've passed with specific conditions.
No, I think I'm okay. I think it's a unique situation if you have a hemp shop next door. But I do want us to keep in mind as we look at these and always consider the consistency of rules and applications and requirements. As I think about, the wall, I understand the request for Mr. Waddleton, and we have done it somewhat consistently in the past. And maybe it's a larger discussion, but is there a reasonable alternative to that? Because we haven't been presented with a reasonable alternative to that. So no, I don't need any further information right now, but thank you for asking.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Webb?
Is there an MOU from the community council?
There's a summary.
Okay, there's that.
This is a summary of the meeting, but did they,
Community engagement report, so they can either do an MOU or a community engagement.
oh, that's what they have.
And this community council doesn't often do MOUs.
Okay, so it's been suggested that we could amend this to eliminate condition number 7 in section 3. If that's been resolved. Anybody want to make a suggestion on that, or recommendation on that? And then I guess as a whole, what would be our recommendation for this application?
You know, I think it'd be simple to remove that condition 7 since it's taken care of. But, and then I expect, we plan on amendment that would say that either they build that wall all the way up to the roof decking. Bob, is that the phrasing? Is that what we call it?
That's correct.
Roof
That's
decking,
correct.
all the way to the roof deck, secure wall, solid wall, all the way to the roof decking, or as part of the operating plan, every bit of retail marijuana would be locked in a safe.
So, yeah, I would move to recommend approval with, and then see about the amendment as per Mr. Weddleton's explanation.
Yep. If I might,
Go ahead.
I'll second that, and for discussion purposes, I would add that it doesn't have to be a wall that is like impermeable. It just has to be something that is unpassable. Meaning it could be screening of some kind.
Chicken wire.
Yeah, that's what I was wondering. Yeah, what do you, yeah. No?
I
You
don't
want a
trust
wall.
it. I build walls. I don't trust it.
I would too, but I could imagine not chicken wire, but steel grating that could be manufactured in a way that would work as well. That isn't, I don't know. There are a number of ways you can get there. We don't need to define how they get there. We just need to make sure those spaces aren't
Impassable, some impassable.
passable.
Okay. All right, so, Mr. Gates, would that be something that you could draft up for us?
I think I would work with.
Or you'd rather let Ryan-
Because it
Ryan
would be
do that?
Title 21
Okay.
amendment, I'm sure.
That's correct, yeah, it would likely be tacked onto the conditions of the special land use permit. And just for consistency's sake, and so that the assembly is aware of all their options, I can send what was previously done for Green Alaska Fish Company and Uncle Herbs.
Oh, good.
So that we don't,
Sure.
if we do decide to go down that path, that you're not breaking away from what's been done.
From what we've already done. Good, no, good point, thank you.
So so you're gonna write something up and send it on that amendment?
I could do that.
Okay, great.
Good. Okay,
So
so,
if I may ask, just for clarification, so is the assembly requiring me to build an addition from the wall all the way up to the ceiling, or is my option what I've already stated, that all my THC is going into a locked office
my understanding.
at the close of business every day?
Yes, my understanding from this would be that you would either build that wall, or you would it would be part of the resolution that says that you will at least provide the security in the locked office in the safe, so that it's actually written out. I mean, it's not you just telling us, but you're actually putting it in the license itself.
I can do that.
So-
That's easy. That has been my plan from the very beginning of securing it in an office. I don't believe it's feasible to build an addition based from a structural standpoint. You have metal framing. I was around when that wall was built. You have local metal framing and drywall. Matter of fact, just in December, Ms. Brandt had ran into problems with operating without a CO, so they had to rip half of that wall on the three-leaf side in order to do inspections that were never completed. So, you know, it's metal framing. I don't know how you would be able to, you know, build an addition from 8 foot or 10 foot. I believe these are 10-foot ceilings, very similar to this ceiling here, and go up another 10 foot into it's actually a confined space. I don't know how you would do it, but I don't have that engineering degree. But I did grow up in the construction trade, so I do have some of that common background. I just, you know, but it's easy for me. I can do what my plan was in the very beginning, because I'm all about the security aspect. That's what my background is doing security. So, you know, locks are for honest people. Cameras just keep honest people honest and keep the criminals a little bit more aware that they know they're being watched.
There is definitely some truth to that, so I definitely appreciate that. Ms. Sullivan,
Madam Chair.
something else?
So we just want to be really clear, though, I think, that we'll make this recommendation and there will be the amendment. It will go before the entire body for debate, and the body will pass or not pass whatever it does, and it could be the requirement of the wall. So I just think that should be really, really clear. As I stated, I'm willing to offer a reasonable alternative, but I have 10 other colleagues that will have their own opinions. So we'll hope to see on Tuesday night what happens.
Yeah, this is on for this week, correct? So this next week. So yes, and so we're making a recommendation here, but you may have this whole conversation all over again with the full body. So you might be prepared for that. But we're definitely going to, like I said, make the recommendation that there should be an either or at this point. Some obviously prefer one part of that either or than the other. But again, yeah, we have the full conversation on Tuesday.
Okay, great.
Great, well, thank you. If there's nothing else then on this particular one, I think we're good. So thank you, Mr. Owen. So, and we have tentatively on here a meet and greet with Mr. Klinkart.
Not here.
And I don't believe,
We didn't have a confirmation.
So, okay, all righty. Okay, then if we move on, we have an opportunity to talk a little bit more about how we might be wanting to update this process that we're involved in right now. So I don't know that we have any additional information other than kind of a jumping off point that we've had for the last, I don't know, month or so. Is there any potential discussion here? Has anybody got something that they would really like to talk about?
I could throw something out there, which is
We
timely.
might have Ms. Welzine, she's got some thoughts too. Actually, do you want to join us up here at the table, Janet?
I would make it so that anyone in the public.
And certainly, if anybody wants to jump in here, we've got plenty of chairs here.
Suggestions.
So, yeah, suggestions. And Mr. Weddleton, did you have something that you wanted to start off the conversation
Yeah, it's
with?
not news, but
Okay.
I think it's on my list. But we should address how these things are built in strip malls. You know, I mean, obviously, I'm very concerned about that wall, but make it clear in the code that you could be expected to do that. And you know, I think if he locks this stuff up in the office, that's probably okay. He's still vulnerable. You know, it's marijuana and cash. You know, these places are particularly vulnerable. Break-ins through smashing in the windows and so on in retail is not uncommon. It's happened to me. And they didn't get much, but they still break in, you know. And climbing over the roof, it's not hard, in my experience, to add on. You can lift the ceiling tiles and put sheetrock up there. So, I mean, it's kind of overblown, the cost and the difficulty of it. I will always do that if I'm in a strip mall. I'm securing the wall when I'm in the place. And it's not like I'm taking pockets. You know, it's not that, it's thousands of dollars. It's not tens of thousands. So, but that is something that I want to see.
Okay, I think Mr. Dunbar has a comment on that. So
No,
if you
I have
wanna-
another separate.
Anyway,
Oh,
but
separate
that's,
one. Okay.
since we've been feeding,
Sure,
since I've been
yeah.
feeding that to death.
Yeah, makes sense. So, anyway. Okay, then different comment, Mr. Dunbar.
Yeah, so, and I can't remember if this is something we're already working on or not, but related to strip malls and similar large properties, we recently granted a variance because, you know, we were measuring from the property line as opposed to the door, and it was impractical. And really, we should be measuring from the door in those kind of multi-tenant, large lots in my mind. So, have we changed that, or are we planning to change that?
We have not changed it, nor am I aware of any potential options to change it. That, in that case, it was the 200-foot lot length to lot line rule.
Yeah.
The front door to front door does apply to churches, so that did apply in that case, and that was met.
Okay.
But it was that 200-foot lot line to lot line that applies to all protected land uses that was not met.
So that's the thing that I'd like to have us consider and possibly revise, because I know what Mr. I remember when Mr. Weldon put that in and what the spirit was, but when you have these very large commercial properties, the spirit is sort of, it's I think an unintended consequence.
Well, but maybe the better way to address that is to have the potential for exceptions when you have extremely large lots like that, rather than trying to pick on each individual lot that we've already decided deserves some kind of protective buffer.
Yeah, I don't know. I tend to...
Because we did that with one particular one.
We did it, and there is a variance process, but I would rather us try to find a way to put it in the code than rely on variances.
We have a comment. Yes.
Well, I would
Go
say
ahead.
that, Dave Whitfield with planning, I would say that if your intent for us is to reduce the setbacks for marijuana establishments, then by all means do that. But if your intent is to address this one issue, I think it's probably more appropriate that you look at the exception to variance process in doing that. If you think, as I said before, that the setbacks for marijuana establishments in general are, too restrictive or too restrictive and you want to reduce that, then fine, we can work on that. But I would suggest that in looking at a situation like this, that you go through the variance process.
Madam Chair.
Okay, we have a couple comments, so, I'm sorry. Okay, go ahead, Mr. Constant.
Yeah, I personally would like us to contemplate changing our setback rules to match the state. We were very, and not for Eagle River, they can set their own rules, but for in the bowl, it just seems to me that having two sets of setback rules makes it very complex and difficult. And I think that the state has a fair and reasonable approach, and we should contemplate in as much as possible, as we've seen these operations work, tailoring our setbacks more closely to the state.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Constant. Ryan, you had a comment.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I just wanted to comment on the Cold City Cannabis case. That was a picture-perfect case for a variance. It was one that we were willing to support, and it was a situation that variance tool, that's the reason why we had that tool. So I don't think that looking at that case is a reason to say that the separation distance measurements are flawed, but that we have a tool that works for people that, I'll just point out, doesn't have an additional fee included in the application. It is one additional step to run through, but that's the reason why we have that tool.
Okay.
And it's an example of one that works.
I think Forrest has something along that lines. Okay, go ahead, Mr. Dunbar.
Well, okay.
We're trying to clarify which establishment that was. But anyway, go ahead, Mr. Dunbar.
I guess I need to be more familiarized with the variance process, because there was a developer in East Anchorage several years ago who was trying to get a variance to add a greenhouse on top of his senior care facility, and he was told by people at planning, this is what he relayed to me, that it was easier to change the code to get a variance. Basically, he was not going to get a variance, and so that's what we did. We actually changed the code, and he unfortunately built the place before we ran through it. Or they still have it. He could still add it, but he built this huge facility. So why is this variance process? Is it easier than other variance processes, or does it happen more often, or is it the same as the variance process for like adding a greenhouse on top of your building, for example?
I wouldn't necessarily say it's easier. I'd say it's difficult to compare the two situations.
Okay.
Because so I'm very familiar with that facility because I was the individual who wrote that ordinance to change the code.
Yeah.
That one, you were getting into bulk of a building and height of a building and the obtrusiveness of that building and its how much it's going to impose on neighboring properties. In this particular case with the previous marijuana facility and that variance tool, it was an industrial area that had other industrial uses that were possibly more or adversely impacting their neighbors and to a higher degree than the marijuana facility ever would be. We typically don't say it's easy to get a variance because it is an additional step you have to go through, and we always kind of give a canned answer. It's a 50-50 shot because we can't give any guarantees whether or not you're going to get approved. There is a difference when it comes to, a single-family residence and having their deck encroach 2 feet into a required setback versus a variance for a marijuana shop that's going to encroach near a church. I mean, those are two very different situations that are hard to compare to each other. But there are situations where deviating from code to the T can work and can work in a meaningful way. So in a way that doesn't impact the neighbors. So I think that's why we have the variance tool. And I think it's important to keep that tool.
Yeah, I'm not suggesting eliminating the tool. I'm suggesting changing this code if it doesn't seem to work in some cases.
I have Mr. Webb, do you want, okay, go ahead, Ms. Soliton. Oh, you have, sorry.
So on the variance issue really quick, I think I would be up for a discussion about changing the variance tool in that particular element that's always nearly impossible to meet, that came up a couple of times because you have to prove it in the negative, like that it will never have adverse neighborhood impacts. So I think there might be a tweak to the variance tool to then make it more useful because I think the variance has like a bad rap, like in terms of people think that you can never get a variance. But that one particular element, it came up in that marijuana case that we wanted very specific fact findings because previously it was that we would almost never be able to know that in fact we were able to do that. So that might be a way to make it a more useful tool.
There you go, Mr. Gates. Okay, Mr. Gates.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, what I recall is we had 2 variances for marijuana establishments granted so far. You applied for just one. We had that recent one called Creek or something. Didn't we have one on Diamond, Great Northern Cannabis?
No, they replatted.
Great Northern Cannabis chose to replat their parcel so that the lot lines would meet the required separation distance.
So that was just another tool that you could replat the lots so that you could meet the lot line separation distance required. And then if I also recall, we've had several situations where variance might have been needed, but the situation was resolved by either an applicant deciding to choose a different location, and that would be early in the process, but that's happened before, hasn't it? And we've also had, I guess, the Alaska Sense situation where downtown Hope Center was just reclassified. So we'd have several approaches, I think, to resolving the circumstances that arise, and the variance is just one of several tools. I think the toolbox is adequate, but I just wanted to make sure I remember the different situations. Haven't we had some early that the applicant decided to just drop the location and look somewhere else?
We have. So I know of 2 specific situations. We had Great Northern Cannabis, and there's also a new facility moving in on the east side. Where they subdivided their parcel so that the lot lines would meet the required 200-foot separation distance. We've also had facilities that if they didn't meet the front door to front door requirement and say they were shy by like 10 feet, then they just shift where their door goes. And then we have had other facilities too where they just choose to completely relocate.
Okay, so there are lots of options, but I keep putting off
It's
Mr.
okay.
Weddleton.
Well,
but-
Thanks. So there's different kinds of variances, and in this case for marijuana, the variance comes to us, right? It doesn't go through the process, but you can also do administrative variance where it just goes to the planning director, right? And is this, I mean, for some things like that 200-foot separation, maybe we could say, variance, you get an administrative variance if basically it makes sense. I mean, I'm sure you put some rewording in there, but that way they just doesn't even come to us. It would just, when they talk to staff, they go, look, it's a huge property and our store's thousands of feet away, but the property, basically that example we have at the big mall. I mean, would that be helpful to make it an administrative variance?
I mean, the administrative variance tool, kind of making it subjective, and that's the hard part, is that you're placing you're relinquishing control of that decision and giving it to the planning director versus having the assembly control that decision. I don't know if we have an opinion on the matter at this point, but we can definitely discuss that.
Okay.
I
Mr.
think
Gates.
it seems sort of to mix things up because the marijuana establishment approval is ultimately the assembly's, so the variance is part of that application. So I think that when you have an administrative variance, that's usually where the approval for a permit or use is also administrative variance. Is that like true all the time?
That's a good way of putting it.
Yeah, I would say that while the director may have authority over some administrative variances, in this particular case, with marijuana, I would say it would probably be more appropriate that the assembly deal with that at the same time that the license, special land use permit is being discussed.
Do you want to follow up?
Or the marijuana commission, they're the ones that will be
Or
dealing
the
with it.
commission.
But once they are stood up. I really like Ms. Zolotel's suggestion. I hope we flag it and move forward with it, that we need to revise the criteria in such a way that we don't end up in another downtown Hope Center situation where it was basically impossible for them to meet the variance standard. So that, I think, should be our first priority. The second, though, I do think, I remember, because he used this famous phrase from the Opium Wars, Mr. Wellington kept talking about spheres of influence.
I changed their bubbles.
Yeah, and protecting the public by having this 200-foot lot line to lot line requirement. But what we've just described is marijuana shops going through, replatting a parcel. Doesn't that make any appreciable difference for the actual public safety, or make any physical difference in terms of the distance from whatever the protected use was? So what we've seen them do is jump through these regulatory hoops, or in some cases go to wholly different locations, because we have put this in effect. So I just don't see a lot in those cases that we've used, and it's one variance has been granted in 3.5 years. I mean, to me, that is indicative of a system that actually probably isn't working. If they're having to do things like replatting, so I would.
There's only one that was applied for.
Right, because they see the variance process and they're like, I would rather just replat the parcel, or I'd rather like.
I would say that a lot of the issue is the lack of assurity in the variance process. So by not being assured that they're going to be granted the variance, they look at other options.
Right, but again, in the replat case, you haven't done anything to appreciably change the public safety, and like in the East Anchorage case, I know right now, the Northeast Community Council is starting to get up in arms about it. They're like, wait a minute, we don't understand how they're getting away with this, and I didn't realize it was going to be a replat. That's what we're doing, but doesn't seem to. In that case, they do have public safety concerns. It doesn't seem to have alleviated them. And the other cases, it doesn't seem to make any appreciable difference to public safety. They're doing it because, again, they're in these very large lots. The case unless I'm mistaken where they're building it, isn't it where the old M Seafoods was?
It's across the street.
Right. So I think it's not in a big strip mall. It's like one little building, but it's a big lot, and so they're going to replat it. And so again, I think there's these big lots. I think it doesn't fit very well in the lot line to lot line idea if we're trying to actually improve some public safety.
Yes, go ahead.
Do you guys, for planning, when you're looking at a variance application, do you look at previous variances granted for consistency of application of the variance process? I know you look at specific facts, but like in this one where there was the large lot and we had those specific factual findings made, if you see another case that's somewhat similar, does that hold any persuasive effect over you guys, or
technically no.
Technically no. Okay.
No. So when we look at a variance application, the application stands on its own.
Okay.
It's an independent review of this particular situation. There may be other situations that are similar. But we look at this situation, and no previous action is precedent setting for a future.
Okay, thank you.
Well, I certainly hope that we have options and different ways of looking at things, but I certainly don't want variances either to just be the assumption that, well, if you get a variant, you're gonna get a variant. I mean, all of it needs to go through a process where you've got a second or third or fourth set of eyes and opinions, you know, in terms of how it should turn out. But I mean, that's why we have land use codes and protective land usage issues. And anyway, but I appreciate the fact that, you know, we can have a conversation like this, and however many levels we need to do that on, I think is probably good and ends up with a better product for the public. So, okay, anything else that we would like to see addressed?
Jana Watsine, I don't have anything on the variance, but I did have a couple things in Title 10. So 1080-366, it's a section about marijuana product manufacturing, and it alludes to that the department's director, Anchorage Department's director, has to, like, you know, approve new products, approve retest and whatnot, and it just is so not applicable because we don't do that with the muni, we do that through the state. So maybe staff could take a look at that and see, like, we don't go to the clerk's office and verify a retest result. We don't do that.
So why do you suppose that was in there? What was the
I
intent
think
of that?
it's just a crossover from state. I think we took state regulation and then try to make it muni specific, but like in actuality, we don't bother the muni with retests at all, because I mean, it's never been something that the muni has indicated once.
Okay.
1080-366.
366.
Yep.
Okay.
Um,
oh, sorry.
Oh,
Jana, hold on one second. Did you have a question? Okay. Any other questions?
wasn't it the health department that would oversee that?
They don't.
That's what I think.
Yeah,
They just don't.
They do not. That's what it says, but they do not. So, and as practice, nobody goes through the health department of Anchorage for retest.
So is that a failure on their side to be enforcing it?
No,
I don't-
it's a May statement. It's a May statement, not
Oh,
a
got
shall
it.
statement.
Okay, okay.
It was included to give local jurisdictions the ability to do that, and Anchorage Health Department has not exercised it.
Okay.
Because the state doesn't.
Yeah, the state does
Because
it,
the
so.
state does it.
But it was a right that was specifically requested to be reserved with municipalities.
And the state is actually doing it, considering, okay.
Yeah, big time the state does it. So something to consider, in another section, see, 1080.100. C, so it talks about that applicants may request new products and the additional fee is $0. So it kind of seems like the language is saying that we come to the muni and request a new product, but new product being approved by the muni isn't required. We just do that through the state. So it's another kind of like thing that might be a little too complicated for no use. I mean,
The director has to sample every new product. Is that the?
Yeah.
That's the law.
Didn't we just change that? What did we do last meeting?
So not the fee section, sir.
Wasn't the fee, but
That was, through Chair Ryan, you might be referring to methods of manufacturing and which, adding new methods of manufacturing requiring that modification to go to the assembly. And we changed it so it can be approved administratively by the director.
okay, but if they add different products, does that come back to us?
We don't ever do it.
No.
Does it say we will?
I'm sorry, should I ask the question? Oh, on the.
For new product.
No.
1081.
Yeah, so it's 1080.
It's a non-refundable fee. I think, if I may, some of the history on this weird language in here that says there shall be a fee and that fee shall be $0 was to reflect at the time the language of the citizen initiative that passed. And so when they were writing the local Anchorage municipal codes, they put that in there as an affirmative declaration that the city will not charge a fee.
But it's just confusing,
Yeah.
sorry, to licensees,
Yeah,
because it's like, you know, if you haven't been following this process for the last 3.5 years, you're gonna look at these Title 10 and be like, oh, I have to apply to the muni for a new product, oh, I have to bring the retest through. And I'm just looking at this as cleanup, so these are just my ideas for areas of cleanup.
Okay, Ms. Zolotel has
But
something.
all right, I guess I want to make sure, though, if they're all differentiate what's a may statement and a shall, because if they're may statements and they're just reserved for, then I think they should probably stay put. And it will just be conversations with licensees to make sure it's really clear that we're not doing it right now. And then if it is something the health department decides to undertake with whatever funding they find to do that with, then it would be really clear that that's going to start. Because I wouldn't want to strip that away and then have to redo it later if it's otherwise applicable to municipality.
So it doesn't say may, it's just under the fee. So it just goes, a non-refundable fee to request a change of approval in a licensed veterinary establishment's business name, ownership, licensed premises, operating plan, or proposed new product is $0. So the rest of the stuff goes through you guys. The rest of the stuff that I just mentioned, it does go through you guys and the state, but the new product just doesn't. So if everything else in that sentence goes through you guys, but then there's one thing that doesn't go through you guys,
If I may, through the chair, I don't think it has no effect. So,
Okay.
Because it's a $0 fee, and it's a inclusive list of the types of items that will be charged $0. So it has absolutely no impact, I think, on your clients. It may be confusing, because if you see something that says, you shall pay a non-refundable fee, you're like, ah.
yeah, you think
But then if you
that's
read
like
the rest of the sentence, it says it's $0.
right. I'm just saying it leads people to think they have to apply for it, but it's fine. I know it doesn't have a huge practical effect. I'm just going cleanup wise.
Yeah, I understand, and I think you have a good point, but at the same time, I kind of agree with Ms. Solotel. If it's in there, but it doesn't really have any impact, I guess it's okay for it to stay, but Mr. Weddleton.
Well, I agree, but what we're hearing is confusing people.
Totally.
And we want, as best we can, code to be understandable by normal people. And you know, but it's worth looking at. Sometimes it's a very small wording. We're like, okay, not normal people can understand it, and we're the same place we were. So, you know, if you could recommend wording that keeps it the effect the same, but just say, let's take it, and you just say take that.
Yeah, just take the new product thing out, because if it doesn't go through you guys, then.
I think there's a disagreement.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I'm just pointing out things, and then
Sure.
another one that I had was 108315. So this is the requirement that the Muni doesn't want you to apply for the Muni license or the special land use license until you have a completed application from the state. And I can see the benefit of that, but it does often actually have a pretty slowdown effect on licensees' processes. So the borough, the Mat-Su borough, you can start the CUP process before you get a complete application by the state. So I don't know if that's something that the assembly would consider revisiting.
Okay, can you give the
108315.
350? Thank you. I think Mr. Weddleton has a comment or question on that one.
Oh, I guess the question is to ask staff, because it does make sense. I mean, this is a stinker to watch these poor people pay rent for years. But we can start once the state says we have a complete application. So then we start our process, right? So you don't have to have it approved.
No, it's just when
Right.
completed, but completed takes like 3 months on the state side, and then you guys take 3 months to run it through the special land use. So it's a 6-month minimum, no ifs and buts about it. It could be 3 months if we could just start it kind of concurrently.
Okay, go ahead, Mr. Weddleton, and then Ms. Weddleton.
So maybe I misunderstood something. My understanding is you're saying it takes 3 months to get to the point where AMCO says, okay, this is completed.
Exactly,
You don't
yeah.
just, you've done dozens of these
Yeah, you
things.
go
You
in
don't
and
just
they
turn
do-
it in, here's my application, they review it, say it's complete,
No.
and then they go through their process.
No. They put you in the queue, and then they review each application and give you things to change, and then you give it back to them, and then they deem it complete, but you sit in the queue for a while.
Well, that's news to me then.
Well, that's the reason we've been having the big delays.
Okay, does staff have any feedback on that?
I think our general consensus is that without the deemed complete application from the state, and I didn't realize it was taking quite so long over there, but without that, it seems premature to apply for the other permits locally.
Is there things that the state could require you to change in the application that could affect the land use portion? So
Right.
that would be my concern, is that we start down the path at the municipal level, and then there's a veer or a change at the state, and then we're gonna have to redo work at the municipal level.
That would be our-
There's not, and that's what I would assume that the concern is. So, but really, the changes that come that would affect how the business actually operates is going to be when the Marijuana Control Board does what's called delegations, and that's saying like, hey, we really don't like, you know, that you have a drop down ceiling and you don't build it all the way up, so we're gonna say you have to build it all the way up. Those kinds of things. Yeah, those kinds of things. They actually do make those kind of delegations based on looking at the very detailed plans and having 5 members that have been doing this, you know, for a while. They have delegations that get changed in the meeting. So regardless, we get changes in the meeting a lot anyways that actually affect the operational plan. So it kind of, you know, I mean, if you really wanted to wait until the state had it, a final approved operating plans, you would wait until after the Marijuana Control Board approves it, but we obviously don't want to do that because they only meet 4 times a year. So it's just something to consider. And then another one that I had was the home addresses, and I know the clerk's office has got a lot of concerns about this, but 1080, and I'm going to lean on Dean for this, but 1080-905 is the public records section, and I was wondering if it would be possible, and this would be a legal question for Dean, if we could add home addresses as being exempted from the public record.
Okay.
And that's a huge one that has been like on everybody's mind because we don't have banking access yet.
All right, I think Mr. Gates wanted to comment on that anyway, so, Mr. Gates, did you?
Oh,
The idea of the home addresses being in public record.
well, it's one thing that hasn't been protected from disclosure. Someone's name and home address. I mean, I'm into link beyond the name records and so forth. In public records law, generally, the person's name and home address are really not protected. Generally, I'm not sure. You want special exception for marijuana establishment owners. We question we have special exception for police officers, and so forth. So I think you get down a slippery slope there. And the reality, the legal reality, there's arrangements people can make to protect their home address from public records, like establishing LLC, the PO box, and so forth.
Well, but
There's
we're not allowed to
number
do
of
that.
arrangements you can make.
Well, we've never been able to do that. So even if like a client's home is owned by a trust or an LLC and they have a PO box associated with that LLC, the clerk's office isn't going to accept a PO address as the home address of an applicant. So never has that been allowed.
Okay, I have Mr. Dunbar and then Ms. Salatel.
Yeah, so we as public officials obviously have to disclose our home address too, which I've always sort of bristled at. I mean, in our case, we have to prove that we're living in our district. Do you think you could do that in a way that didn't require us to list our home address? There was just a high-profile home invasion and murder last night in Los Angeles. No, this is a rap artist, maybe more like your clients than us in terms of the amount of cash they hold.
Definitely on the cash.
But literally, it was because one of his friends had posted his home address. It had been in like the background of an Instagram video, and so people broke into his house and murdered him. So I'm very sympathetic to this. I think that. To Mr. Gates' point about police officers and other folks, I mean, I think that we should be looking to find ways to exempt them too, and we're working right now on a domestic violence ordinance to make it less easy to find the home address of domestic violence survivors. So I am sympathetic to that. But even if we make a change, doesn't the state, Jana, what kind of requirements does the state have?
They do not require you to put your home address anywhere.
Really? So how do they know? Because it was supposed to be Alaska-owned business. How do they know?
Yeah, because of PFD residency. So they use the PFD program. And so if you don't apply for the PFD and you don't get an eligible result, and you're just saying, you're like, for political reasons and moral reasons, I don't want to apply for PFD, you file what's called an MJ-18. And an MJ-18 has like all this really detailed information and none of it is public.
Okay. So I'm sympathetic to this. I'd like us to further explore ways to not require them to disclose their address.
Madam Chair.
Just a minute, Mr. Constable. Let me give Ms. Salatel, and then we'll come back to you.
Thank you. So I would like to know kind of what's the impetus for the clerk's office requiring the actual home address, so a little bit of background on that. And I know it may be an answer we get later in terms of, or if we could get to the same results with a different sort of information or something else, because I think there's probably something here. I mean, people get really worried about this kind of stuff. Actually, with our public officials' disclosures, I have to actually disclose my tenants, who they are, and my rental properties and where they live, and they are always really hesitant about that as well. So any of these kind of public records disclosures, I mean, I am extremely sympathetic. So I kind of want to get to, can we fulfill whatever the clerk's office desires in some way that balances the interests?
Good. So, Mr. Constant,
Oh, they may know the answer.
Mr. Constant, let me.
Okay.
Thank you. I don't know that it's the clerk's office. I think it's the tax division that is the one who publishes all this information, really, because all you need is the name of an operator, go to the tax appraisal, find where they own the property, and it's all available. And I just take a little bit of disagreement with the story of LA, that the assumption is just because there were public records he was attacked. We have no idea what the facts are in that case. And I mean, I've had people circling my house. They know where I live, and yes, it's creepy, and maybe there is a better way, but open records are a vital part of our governance, and so it's certainly going to be an interesting conversation.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Constant. I think we had a couple of comments. Ryan, did you have something you wanted to add? And then I know Jana had something else.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. I think it was just the reason for the physical home addresses. I believe that that information gets disseminated across different municipal agencies to check for like library fines, which are no more anymore, but or like outstanding parking tickets and things like that. So
Never checked for library fines.
We should start doing now.
Can I ask a follow-up to that, Ryan?
Yes, go ahead. Yeah, go ahead with Ryan, sure.
Well, is there a way to do that without adding it to the public disclosures? Couldn't we disseminate that in
Through
the
the chair,
file
yeah,
itself?
we'll take this back because, as Ryan pointed out, it serves a valid function as a test of issuing the license. But whether or not that needs to be publicly disclosable, we can certainly address.
All right, so, Ms. Weltzing, did you have
Oh, I was
another question on that?
I would just echo Chris's comment on that, because there's no problem with us providing it to the muni, but I was hoping if we could just provide it under one of those exemptions that are already in 1080-905. That is just, that is just not public, is what I would hope. And the only other one thing I had was that the state recently, I don't know how recent it was, probably like 4 months or so, allow for manufacturers and cultivators to provide employee quality assurance samples. And I was doing a brief run through Title 10, and I didn't see that in here, so I don't know if that's just something that needs to be pulled over and updated, that like breweries and whatnot, you can now give your employees up to an ounce of marijuana or up to, I think it's 7 grams in a 30-day period for quality, like assurance testing, like, what's the product like? Do we want to make this strain again? Do we want to make this hash again? Do we want to make the shatter again? Do we like it? That kind of stuff. And I don't think that's been into the Title 10. And I think it would go somewhere in 1080, 405, but I could be wrong.
Okay.
Say that's just
Any
the-
comments or
we see the
just
state regulation.
Okay, yeah.
Let you guys analyze.
Yeah.
Here's an ounce of hash
I
for
like
quality
that.
assurance.
Well, you can't do an ounce of hash.
Oh,
It'll
okay,
be up
yeah.
to 7 grams in a 30-day period.
Sure,
Well,
sure,
yeah,
sure.
there's a limit.
I guess I would look for the recommendation of what
That's
you're
awesome.
planning, and you guys want to recommend as to whether or not that should be crossed over into municipal code. And you can certainly take your time and discuss it and think about it. Thank you.
So, Jana, if I may,
Go ahead, Mr. Judy.
in your opinion then, are the allowable provisions in 1080-405 now that relate to conduct in-house testing, in your mind, that does not include this employee quality assurance
I
program?
don't know, maybe it could. I guess, the
So
language.
we can look at it in closer detail.
I
I
thought
think when
in-house
this
testing
was
was like a test.
drafted 5 years ago, it was very clear back then that there would not be samples.
Mhm.
But there was, in-house testing was allowable, and I think it was at that time envisioned to be much more of the nerdy scientific in-house testing of quality and all that stuff. But if there is an interpretation where in-house testing could also include this new quality assurance provision of state's code, and I have to look at it, I haven't seen it yet, but that maybe are there already.
Okay. All right. Any other questions, comments?
But just
Mr.
so
Deaton,
you're
go ahead,
aware, I'm
Mr.
in the
Gates.
middle of gathering all the state regulations, just to make sure we are matching our code update to them, so this particular one will be part of that list.
Yes, definitely. Okay. All right. well, if we don't have anything else on this, we'll obviously be visiting it again and looking at potentially some language to come up with some of these fixes or changes or potential amendments. And we'll carry on the conversation. So, anything else from assembly members? Mr. Schutte.
Yeah,
go
just
ahead.
one thing. You heard Chair Dunbar mention this earlier, but the idea of a marijuana commission, you will see that come forward soon, and we expect that it will. We're going to introduce it, I think, the first meeting in March, and then it will probably take a month to a month and a half to get through it. We're envisioning that it come here and spend quality time, quality sampling time with you guys. We'll take it back. But this was the culmination of a group effort that reflects the Assembly's interest in delegating some of the review and approval authority that this group does to a citizen commission. And so, Jana, we'll lean on you to get that word out when we're ready.
Okay, great. All right, thank you. So, if we don't have any other comments, then we can go to audience participation. We might actually be ending early today. Any audience participation? Go ahead, Miss. Yes, go ahead, Mr. Haberman.
My name is Eugene Carl Haberman, Alaska resident for over 40 years. It's been 20 years in the Anchorage and currently a resident of the Valley. Note for the record, Assemblymember Wellington left at 10:08, so he's not present for my comments. And that's a problem because when you listen to these tapes, you don't know when some of the members are coming in and out. And that's important. Number one, there was several times, frequently, from the staff not being recognized and not noting the name. It's impossible to follow listening to the tapes who is speaking. And that's not the way to go. A free-for-all leads to a longer meeting and it shows lack of respect. And it's frequent offenders are the same people in this room. So, and then, what stood out is number 4A says discussion topics of possible updates to 10.80 marijuana. I don't see a single copy, hard copy of 10.80 in this room. And if it is, it's among some single members of the Assembly or staff, but it's not there for the public. So how can you be discussion on that, and you don't even have hard copies of that? So it wasn't there. And then I see a policy of indifference. I've said from time to time, the notice for the meeting, you don't know what is going to be the agenda until you come into this room and witness what the agenda is and papers for this meeting. And so the public is blind to the scenario. And then that's all basically I have to say. There is one thing, but I'm holding back for the more members of the Assembly, more likely you'll address it, which is a more general thing for everyone concerned with these public meetings, and involves all of them, including the regular Assembly meeting. And so I'll be addressing it there. And then, two parts. Number one, you were approving or making decisions on items here. Where was the public comment in that? You were selective to the industry, marijuana industry, versus other members, and I guess I'm the only one for the public here outside of a member of the industry, so that was even more noticeable. And then, what was the last thing I'm trying to get is, I think that covers it. I'm spaced out on what the other thing was, but thank you, and I'm glad some of the Assembly members did leave, stayed. Others who normally do leave before I speak, and I'm sorry Assemblymember Wellington wasn't present. Thank you.
Thank you,
With 7 seconds to spare.
Okay, thank you. Okay, well, I appreciate all the conversation, and we've got lots of things to continue on. If there's any objection to adjourning? No hearing. We're adjourned.